Thank you so much, Dr. Worrell. Next, I'd like to introduce Shane Doyle, Doctor of Education. He's a member of the Crow tribe, hailing from Crow Agency, Montana. He holds a master's degree in Native American Studies and a PhD in Education, Curriculum, and Instruction from Montana State University. For his dissertation, he studied the Absaroka Agency archaeological excavation. Dr. Doyle is an adjunct professor of Native American Studies at his alma mater, teaching Native American belief and philosophy. He has also worked with tribal colleges within the Montana Indian reservations, and since 2006, with more than a dozen public schools throughout southwestern Montana as an Indian Education for All curriculum and cultural consultant. In 2014, he served as a liaison between Montana tribes and an international team of scientists who conducted a genetic study of the Clovis child, which we'll hear about also in this panel. Dr. Doyle.
All right, thank you very much. It's great to be here in Washington, D.C. Love this city. And I had an uncle who worked for the BIA for 20-some years. And and my aunt and uncle and a couple cousins that grew up out here and used to come back in the summer. And the only thing I knew how to do was just go to the interior department basement. There was a basketball court down there. And there was no air conditioning, but that's okay. We didn't care. We really sweated down there. And there were some decent players. Where am I at? Okay, there I am. And so, at that time, I kind of had developed a love for Washington, D.C., and really enjoy coming back here. And so, again, it's an honor to be here. Have a lot of friends at the Smithsonian, and have been able to do a little bit of work with them. So, just really excited to be here with all you good people. And I just wanted to share a little bit about my story, about what happened here with this DNA study that was done on this ancient little boy. And, I have a PowerPoint here that just basically is about Montana Plains Indians. We like to joke around all the time. You guys too? Where you're from? Back home, everybody's always joking around. So, I kind of put that, this is kind of a play on humor from Landlords to Tenants. And so, that's kind of where we're at in this big colony they call America. And, that's one of the things that comes through with these DNA studies on these ancient people. They call America the greatest country in the world, but really it's probably the greatest colony in the world. And it might actually have been the greatest colony of all time, outside of bacterial infestations. We're talking about something here that's very large and overwhelming and sweeping, right? And then when you go over to Europe and you see how those people operate over there, way different. They think about things over there. Over here, we're just tuned into what we're going to get. How much more can we get? This American culture. And so the finds like the one that were in Montana kind of really make that more apparent. Americans are so disconnected from their history, from human history and from world history. And it's discoveries like this that really kind of bring home the point that, we've been around a long time as human beings, and we don't know very much about who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. This is a quote from a guy had the pleasure of hanging out with Curly Bear Wagner up in Browning. And so up on the Great Plains, we're very ceremonial. We really believe in ceremony. That doesn't mean we don't tell jokes in our ceremonies. But our ceremonies are also pretty extreme, and it reflects where we're from, our climate and the Great Plains. And you can see here in this illustration that we always had ceremony, and we always had our ceremonies in a circle. And we still do. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about today is the circle and how you recognize circles and respect them. Not just the circles that are on the ground made out of rocks, but every circle, the circle between me and this lady sitting here, you know, that right now is kind of, it's still sacred between me and her because nothing has violated it. You know, we have a good thing going here, you know, me and her. And I'm kind of in control of things, and so that's all right for now, right? And but not for long. And you know, you can see those circular relationships everywhere in our world, and you don't have to really look very hard. You know, when people put someone in a grave, that's part of that circle too. And when they cover it back up with earth, and they say final prayers and they walk away, that sacred circle is left unbroken. And so we pray, we hope that that's how it's going to stay. And it doesn't always play out like that. Sometimes those sacred relationships, those sacred circles are disturbed. And then we have to figure out, how do we heal them? How do we come to terms with what we've done, and how do we learn and grow and actually get better from the circles that have been disturbed and broken? This used to be Montana back before they discovered gold in Virginia City, and then later on at Last Chance Gulch in Helena. And you can kind of see the Crow Reservation was pretty big. We were nice to white people, so they were nice to us for a while at first. Just kidding. They weren't that nice. Okay, they were. Here's our reservation boundary here. And where the boy was found is right on that boundary there, pretty close to it. This is the Yellowstone River coming up out of the Yellowstone Park, flowing across Montana. And that was part of our original reservation. My great-great-great-great-grandfather, his name was Mountain Tail. And his name is on the 1851 treaty that designated this land here. At that time, when he designated this land, his granddaughter, my great-great-grandmother, was being born right along this borderline here on the Musselshell River. Her name was Strikes the Gun. And so back in September 2013, when I got a call to go to the Anzac site to meet Dr. S.K. Willerslev and Sarah Anzac and some of the archaeologists that were involved, I brought this knowledge with me. I knew exactly where I was at. I knew exactly, who used to live there, my family, and going back a long ways. And then when I was told by the team that they had done a DNA study on a 12,500-year-old boy that was there, I found out that information at the scene where the boy was discovered. And it was a very overwhelming moment for me. I had to think about a lot. And so they said, we did a DNA study on this boy. He's 12,000 years old. And he's related to 80% of all the Indians on both continents. What do you think of that? Wait, could you give me just about 6 months to, settle in here instead of 60 seconds? But that's sometimes we're put in those positions, right? People want to know what you think about it, and you don't even really have time to think too much about it. But I said, I think it's interesting. Very interesting, I mean, I don't even know really quite how to put how interesting it is. But I think you should put him back now. Because it seems to me his parents left him there. And, I think that we should probably respect those people and what they want to do with this little guy. I've had to bury 2- and 3-year-old boys in my own family. It's not anything that anyone would ever dream of ever having to do. And you pray that you would never have to do it. And it's something that you never ever forget. And I was thinking of that when I was there at that gravesite of this little boy. And so I decided right there that I was going to help these people get this little guy back in the ground, because he's given us a lot, and we deserve to give something back to him. So I've stuck around and stayed on board here, and we've met with a lot of people. Sarah and I, we went around, we've talked to Indians all around Montana. We're still getting the word out. The burial is going to be on Saturday, less than a week from today. And so very much looking forward to that day. One of the key guys who has been leading this whole project is a guy out of Denmark, out of Copenhagen, Denmark, by the name of Dr. Eske Willerslev. And, we've gotten to be pretty good friends, me and him. And he really likes Indians. He said when he was a little boy, he wanted to grow up to be an Indian. And so he asked his mom, Mom, do you think I might be related to Sitting Bull? And she said, I don't think so, but you might be related to Buffalo Bill. And, he didn't like that. I told him when I was a little boy, I wanted to grow up to be a scientist. And so now we can hang out with each other, me and you. And so he said, you know what, why don't you bring a bunch of Indians over here and we'll have a conversation. And so I took a couple more tribal people from Montana out to Denmark. I first went out there in December, and then I was just out 2 weeks ago. Took a couple people with me from the Salish Kootenai and then from Eastern Shoshone. And just before us, there were 5 representatives from the Kennewick nations, from the Kennewick man in Denmark as well. And, I think the idea here is that we can come to terms with each other, and we can learn, and we can be respectful, and we can put these people back where they need to be, which is back in the earth. That doesn't mean that we can't learn from them. And that doesn't mean that when that sacred wheel or that sacred circle was disturbed, that we can't repair it, that we can't heal it, and that we can't actually make it stronger and better and bigger. So there's a lot of different ways to look at these things, but coming from Montana, growing up around the medicine wheel and everything, I always think of how do we keep the circle perfect? How do we keep the circle sacred? And I think this guy in Denmark, he's thinking the same way. And he wants to learn from Indians. He wants to be respectful, and he wants to build relationships. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. I have another trip planned in October, and I'll be taking probably at least another 4 people along with me from the Montana tribes, maybe more, trying to get this conversation started about DNA research, not just ancient DNA research, but contemporary. And, trying to do all this without having hard feelings. Because there's a lot of hard feelings out there, and I'm not sure they really get us very far. And so that's been my objective going through, and that's about it. Have I used up my 10 minutes? Oh yeah, that's what it looks like now, Montana. One last slide before I let you go. One of the things that we're looking at that he's interested in is where did the tribes come from that came into Montana, and how did they move around, and if you could actually do DNA research to find that out. Obviously, a lot of Indians are not really going to care about that. Some will. A great portion won't. But it's something to think about. It's a conversation to have. The fear of DNA research, it's just like any other fear. A fear of the dark, a fear of the cold, a fear of the heat. There's a lot of fear out there, Do you just turn around and turn away from that fear, or do you conquer it? Where I come from, and usually I don't tell people my Indian name because my feeling is it's none of your business, If you ask me, I'll tell you. But since we're on the topic, my Indian name is Old Buffalo Bull. And over here in the Great Plains, when the winds blow real hard, the buffalo always point their face right into the wind. And my uncle told me that when I was a teenager. You know, you got a good name there. But you don't know what your name means. No, it means Old Buffalo Bull. No, he said, it means you face the wind, Shane. Whichever way the wind is blowing, you don't turn your back away from it. And so that's how I've seen this discovery and all this research is wind blowing at me, and I'm willing to look into it and get through it. And I'm hoping that by doing that with others, that we can make progress and go somewhere with this, one step at a time. So thank you for listening. Appreciate it.